Dear Thai, our friend asked about situations where there's anger, a situation of anger, and she said she's already heard Thai say that, of course, when we're confronting or we're facing someone who's very angry, the response for us is to practice. But she said what to do when she doesn't feel she has enough stability to really face it. If there's a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of wrong perception, and she herself feels resentment and anger in the situation towards the other person, and she asked the other person to write something about it, to try and bring more calmness, to look together. But it didn't work, and she feels pushed to the limit and not able to practice successfully with the degree of the anger that's there. And so there's a kind of ongoing conflict situation. And how can she handle that?
In any kind of relationship, when we suffer, we have the tendency to think that this suffering has been brought to you by the other person. And this tendency to blame him or her for our suffering. And we hope that the other person will change so that we will not suffer anymore. But in fact, we have not helped the other person to change. We hope that he or she will change, but we have not been able to help him or her to change. And because we have not changed ourselves. Because if we can effectuate a change within, and then we will be able to help the others change. And to sit there and to hope that he or she will change, that's not very realistic. We have to change by ourselves. We should not wait until the situation becomes difficult in order to try to do something. Practicing like that is very difficult. There are moments when you are a little bit more peaceful, and you have to take advantage of these moments in order to practice, to get ready, to change yourself. And what we should remember is that unless I change, I cannot help him or her. I cannot help him or her if I don't change myself. This is the first thing to remember. And the way of to change is to get in touch with our own suffering. Don't be afraid of going back to your suffering. Don't try to cover up your suffering with entertainment. You have the courage to go home to your suffering and hold it, recognize it, and look deeply into it. You should try to understand your own suffering. Understanding your own suffering, that is the beginning of Buddhist practice. The first noble truth, the second noble truth. Suffering and understanding suffering. And from that kind of understanding, compassion arises in ourselves, for ourselves. You know how to be compassionate to yourself. And you get a relief. And if you understand your own suffering, you can better understand his or her suffering. If you don't understand your suffering, you cannot understand his or her suffering. So the first step is to understand your suffering. And the second step is to understand his. And we understand why that person keep behaving like that. We understand why that person keep doing things like that. Because there's so much suffering in him or in her. And he is not able to handle that suffering in him or in her. He's victim of his own suffering, and you become the second victim. So when you look at him or her and you see the suffering that he has become a victim of, your heart open. And you don't get angry. You don't respond in anger anymore. You see that she is a victim. And you are motivated by doing something or saying something that can help him suffer less. So compassion is born in your heart. And now you are able to say something nice to him that you have not been able to say earlier. So I remember that in one retreat in northern Germany, Thầy gave offer a practice for people on the 5th day of the retreat. And the practice of using loving speech in order to reconcile with the other person. We were on the 5th day of the retreat. And many seeds of compassion, understanding had been watered during the first 5 days. We did walking meditation, sitting meditation, listen to Dharma talk, Dharma discussion. So that the only purpose is to go back and water the good seeds in us. The seed of insight, the seed of understanding, the seed of compassion. And that is why on the 5th day everyone was asked to put into the practice the practice of loving speech, to reconnect with the other person. If the other person is in the retreat, that is easier, because she has also been exposed to the good watering of the good seeds. So, but if the other person is not there, you can use your telephone, portable telephone, in order to practice. And you have until midnight to finish your practice. And that was happened in the evening of the evening of the 5th day of the retreat. Next morning, after sitting meditation, 4 gentlemen came to Thầy. German practitioner, and they all reported that last night they had used their telephone, and they in order to practice loving speech, and all 4 of them were able to reconcile with their father. And what surprised them is that they found themselves able to to talk nicely using loving speech. Before before the retreat, they could not believe that they can talk to their father in that way. And yet after 5 days of practice, their heart become tender. Their insight about suffering is clear. They could see the suffering of their father. And that is why they are able to use loving speech. And by talking like that, the door of the heart of the other person is open. And they could discuss and they reconcile through telephone. And these gentlemen, they reported that after the retreat they will come and visit their father. We know that many of us are shy. Even if we succeeded in our practice, we don't come and report. But many couples have been able to reconcile because of their using loving speech. And this happened always in our retreats, a little bit everywhere. In South Korea, in China, in Hong Kong, in Japan, in Macau, in Vietnam. After 5 days of practice, the seed of compassion and understanding in you is water enough, and you find yourself capable of using loving speech. They say something like, Daddy, I know that in the past 5 years, 3 years, you have suffered a lot. I saw it, but I was not able to help you, Father. In fact, I have responded violently with irritation. I could not help you, and I made the situation worse. I'm sorry. Because I did not understand your suffering. Now I see your suffering. I begin to understand. But I need you to help me more. I need you to tell me more about your suffering, your difficulties, so that I will not react like the way I did in the past. You help me, Father. So saying like that, open the door of the heart of the other person. And 5 days of retreat can already bring that kind of miracle. Communication is possible again. And you can do the things you could not do in the past, before the practice. So if we need, and then we can go to a solo retreat, we allow us the space of 5 days or something like that, in order to do walking meditation, sitting meditation, and look deeply into our suffering and the suffering of the other person. After that, we can sit down and write a letter. Saying that we are sorry, we have responded with irritation. We didn't understand his or her suffering. And I'm sure that after having written that letter, you feel better already, even if the other person has not read the letter. And that is to work with yourself. And when you feel lighter, freer, more compassionate, and then you have the capacity to help him or her change, and not before. Don't ask him to write the letter, you write the letter by yourself. If your letter is full of understanding and compassion, that will open his heart, her heart, and they will be able to do the same. it works for many people.